prefer to do?
Yeah, that's fine. I just want to say that it was very gracious of Noah to offer to do this presentation for our club on mirrorless cameras. I know some of us have been using mirrorless and some of us are thinking about it. So I think it will be enlightening for everyone. And if you are thinking about buying any equipment, I say check with Hans first or shop around and then check with Hans before you place an order, because they've been an excellent supplier for us. They've been a supporter of our club, and I highly recommend them. I use them all the time. Okay, Noah.
Thank you, Linda.
Before you start, I'm going to mute everybody but you and John.
Okay.
So that we have no background noise. And if you want people to ask questions, they can just hold down their space bar and ask.
Sure, sounds good.
Right. And
all right, I am muted myself, so
yes,
that will
you
work.
and John have that ability.
Awesome. So thank you guys for having me on, and thank you, Linda, for the introduction. Really happy to be here, you guys, and present about mirrorless cameras. With me tonight, I also have John Helgeson from Sony and Eric Sives from Olympus. So if you guys have any specific questions about Sony or Olympus, they'll be presenting after me, talking a little bit about each of their brands, their offerings, and what makes them unique, and are happy to answer any questions you guys have. I'll start off with the general kind of overview about mirrorless as a whole. Then we'll switch over to them. In between the different programs, we can go through some questions. My portion of the program will be about 35, 40 minutes. We can do some questions, pass it along to them, and then do some questions as well. Feel free to put your questions down in the chat. I'll check that at the end of my presentation, answer any questions that you guys have. And even if it's not Sony or Olympus related, if you have any other questions about other systems, I'd be more than happy to answer them as well. But let me go ahead and share my screen here, and I can just pull up my PowerPoint. So for those of you who don't know me or have never met me before or worked with me, my name is Noah Buchanan. I've been working with Hunt's Photo and Video now for almost 4.5 years. I work directly with Gary Farber, who some of you may know, usually doing events, trade shows, conferences all over the country. This year's been a little bit different. As many of you may know, we haven't been able to travel. Haven't done any events, any conferences. Everything's been done virtually this year. So it's been a big adjustment for us. But it's been fun. It's allowed us to work with a lot more groups, a lot more clubs all over the country, and stay in touch with all of our customers, which has been really nice. So if you guys are ever looking for anything, I'll have my contact information at the end of this presentation. Please do reach out to me if you have any further questions about mirrorless. If you're looking to purchase anything, anything for the holidays, we have a lot of different specials going on. I'm more than happy to work up custom quotes for you guys. And be there to assist you with anything that you guys need in your own photography. But without taking up too much time, I do want to jump into tonight's program, which is the mirrorless camera and mirrorless cameras as a whole. Over the past couple of years, mirrorless cameras have really gained a lot of popularity, and for a lot of good reasons, which we're going to talk about tonight. I myself have been shooting with a mirrorless camera for a little over 3 years and have no plans of transitioning back to a DSLR. There's been so many advantages from shooting mirrorless that I've gained that I just did not have with my DSLR. And I'm sure if any of you have already switched over to mirrorless, you'll probably know that as well. For those of you who haven't, maybe this will enlighten you and maybe give you some ideas to possibly transition over. So with all that being said, I want to get the first question out of the way. What is a mirrorless camera and how is it different from your DSLR? So I have two cameras here, a DSLR on the top and a mirrorless on the bottom. With a DSLR camera, again, all the light is going to come in through the lens. It's going to reflect off the mirror, be reflected up through the prism and out the optical viewfinder. So you're seeing exactly the light that is coming through the lens, and that is what you're actually getting through the viewfinder. Now, with a mirrorless camera, we completely eliminate that mirror altogether, hence the name mirrorless, and that light is shining directly onto the sensor inside the camera and is also going to give you a live feedback in the electronic viewfinder, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. But you don't have that prism anymore. You don't have that optical viewfinder. You're getting rid of all the glass and all the components that go along with it. So really, in the simplest way of explaining it, a mirrorless camera is a camera that does not have a mirror. And that could mean a lot of different things, and we'll talk more about what that actually means and what that can do for you. But a mirrorless camera is a camera that does not have a mirror in it. So a pretty simple name. So why do you want to go mirrorless? A lot of people are transitioning over to mirrorless. I am selling far more mirrorless cameras now than DSLRs. I will actually say that I'm selling very little in terms of DSLRs and DSLR lenses. Really everything that I've been selling, I would say 90% of the time, is either a mirrorless camera or a mirrorless based lens. I have seen more people switch over to mirrorless in the past year and a half than ever before. And there's been a lot of great cameras that have come out onto the market this past year, which we'll talk a little bit tonight, about tonight as well. And a lot of good options out there for whatever style of photographer you are and whatever level that you're at. So why do you want to go mirrorless? And first reason is size. And size is probably one of the most commonly talked about things when it comes to mirrorless cameras. And size definitely counts. With these mirrorless cameras, as we saw 2 slides ago, you saw there were less components, there were fewer parts taking up as much space inside them, which is going to make it smaller. And you don't have that optical viewfinder anymore, which means a less bulky prism sitting on top of the camera. So I have 2 examples here, one from Nikon on the top and one from Canon on the bottom. Both full frame 45 megapixel Nikon cameras, pretty much the same sensor inside both of these cameras, the Nikon Z7 and the Nikon D850, but you can see how much smaller that Z series mirrorless is compared to the Nikon D850 DSLR. And then same thing down here with Canon, their EOS R next to their 5D Mark IV, full frame 30 megapixel cameras. So very similar sensors inside both of those, but you're seeing how much smaller that camera is side by side. And then lastly, the flange distance is significantly shorter. So what is the flange distance? Kind of a strange word, especially in relation to photography. All the flange distance is the measurement from the lens mount to the sensor plane itself. So I have that highlighted here in these 2 examples, the DSLR on the left and the mirrorless on the right in this little pink line. And this will vary from camera model or camera manufacturer to camera manufacturer. But overall, mirrorless flange distance is significantly shorter than DSLR flange distance because you don't have to have as much space inside the camera to house that mirror and that big pentaprism that you have where all the light is reflecting off of to see out the viewfinder. And reducing this pretty much affects all aspects of the camera design. You can just see side by side here, even though these 2 cameras are grayed out, you can see they are very different looking. So you're going to have a different designed camera now. I would say one of the most uniquely designed cameras is Fuji. They've kind of taken a more retro approach to their mirrorless cameras where they actually have dials and knobs for your shutter speed, your ISO. A lot of their lenses have aperture rings on it. So you have a lot more freedom when it comes to design of these cameras, and also a lot more freedom when it comes to lens choice and lens selection. So now these camera manufacturers are able to make lenses that are smaller, lighter weights, have faster apertures, and they can do a lot more with lens technology because of that shorter flange distance. And you also have a larger selection in lenses. And with that larger selection in lenses, what that's going to allow you to do is mount your DSLR lenses from either Nikon or Canon onto their mirrorless system now seamlessly. And that is something that I think a lot of people have been hesitant about, not knowing how good these adapters are, but they are really seamless with all of their lenses. The only lenses you will see a difference in are crop frame lenses. So if you're shooting a DX lens from Nikon or an EFS lens from Canon, those are crop frame lenses designed for APS-C size cameras. If you put that on the adapter to one of their full frame cameras, it will still work. It'll still autofocus. It'll still meter. But what the camera is going to do is crop in on the sensor to compensate because that lens is not allowing in enough light to cover the entire full frame sensor. So you would normally have a really strong black vignette around your frame because it's not allowing in enough light. So the camera is going to crop in to compensate for that. So you are going to lose a little bit of image quality and a little bit of resolution, but you can still use them. But all the full frame lenses from Nikon and Canon work seamlessly, no loss of image quality, no loss of focus performance, no loss of anything whatsoever. All that adapter is doing is converting one mount to the other and putting back in that space that we took away when we shortened the flange distance. All of these lenses are designed to be a certain distance away from that center to focus properly. Otherwise, they wouldn't work. So we need these adapters to allow them to focus properly and convert one mount to the other. So on top of just using Nikon and Canon lenses on Nikon and Canon mirrorless cameras, you can pretty much adapt any lens that's ever been manufactured onto any mirrorless camera that you want. Now, you're probably not going to have autofocus. You're probably going to have to shoot in manual and set all of your settings yourself, because you're not going to have communication between the lens and the camera. So you're going to have to manually do everything yourself, but you can still use them and manual focus them very easily. And I'll talk about how you can do that in a little bit. But this is going to open up the doors to your lens selection. As we talked about in the 2 slides ago, we have a huge selection of lenses now that you can choose from in combination with all the different adapters that are out there on the market. So you can try out different lenses. If you have some old lenses lying around, you're going to a flea market or a tag sale, you find some old lenses, you can pick up these adapters relatively cheap. There's no electronic communications in them. All they're doing is converting that mount to the mirrorless camera. And I put together a list here of some of the different lens adapters available with the different mounts. I'm sure there are more. Those are just some of the more popular ones that I could think of, but I'm sure there are more out there that I left off, and I'm sure you will be able to find adapters for those as well. So what this means is these cameras are very adaptable. So if you have some old lenses lying around in your closet or your attic or your garage, you can repurpose those, buy an adapter relatively inexpensively, put them on your new camera and play around with them a little bit. You're going to get a more unique look, maybe a little bit softer focus. The color shift may be not how you want it, but you can play around with it and get some cool results and have some fun with it. I know I personally use a lot of old manual focus lenses, and it's just a nice change from the really sharp, good glass that we have out there right now. Not to say that some of those older lenses aren't sharp, but they're just designed a little bit differently than the modern day lenses that we're used to now. And again, you can use your current lenses on a smaller and more portable body. And there's even some specialized adapters out there to help improve light gathering ability and allow for autofocus with certain lens and camera combinations. Most notably, that's using Canon lenses on Sony cameras and still maintaining autofocus performance. That's what I did. I transitioned from Canon to Sony. I had a lot of Canon lenses. I still have a few that I will use on my Sony camera with an autofocus adapter, and they do work really well. I wouldn't say they're 100% seamless, but I'd say they're probably about 90% of the way there. Sigma makes some adapters as well as Metabones. Those are probably the 2 most popular. And then you can find Canon mount adapters for other systems as well, like Micro Four Thirds and Fuji, that will be decent, but really they work best on Sony. Unfortunately, there's really no good autofocus adapters out there for Nikon lenses, other than putting those Nikon lenses on the Nikon mirrorless system itself. Trying to put Nikon, trying to put Nikon lenses on any other system besides Nikon, you're probably not going to have any autofocus, or it won't be very usable, I should say. So speaking of focus, finding your focus now is easy. Autofocus has come a long way with these mirrorless cameras. Early on, it was definitely something that was lacking a little bit and holding people back from transitioning over, especially wildlife photographers and sports photographers who rely on autofocus. They weren't transitioning over, where now I'm seeing a lot more wildlife photographers switch over. I'm seeing more sports photographers switch over because these cameras can keep up now and sometimes outperform what their DSLRs were capable of doing. And they've really come a long way with focus performance in them. And it's only going to continue to improve as time goes on. And many of these cameras now have things like face detection, eye detection, and some of them even have animal eye detection, where the camera is going to recognize a human's face or their eye or even an animal's eye, lock on and track it and follow it around your screen, which makes it really easy for doing wildlife photography, portrait photography, wedding photography, you name it. If you have a human or an animal in your scene, some of these settings make it very easy to be able to lock on and track focus. So definitely worth checking out. I will say it's not in every single mirrorless camera out there. It's in some select cameras, so definitely look into that. If you have questions about what cameras have it or what cameras don't, be happy to answer that for you. But going over to manual focus, as I was talking about in the other slide, you can use a lot of manual focus lenses now on these cameras with these different adapters. And manually focusing is really easy now, and nowhere near the pain that you had to try to manual focus through an optical viewfinder, especially if you have poor eyesight like I do. I could never use an optical viewfinder to try to manual focus. I just never got it intact, sharp focus like it should have been. But now with the help of focus peaking, which I have an example of over here on the left with this bike rider, This is going to tell you exactly where your focus is in the frame. It's going to highlight whatever part of your subject is in focus, or whatever part of your frame, I should say, is in focus, and tell you exactly, hey, this bike rider is highlighted in red. He is the part of my image that's in focus. And you can go ahead and take that image. That red overlay will be gone. That's not going to be saved onto your file, and he will be tack sharp, which is huge. You can also use that in the rear LCD screen. If you're using live view, that's another option as well. But really using it in the viewfinder is going to make it so much easier now when using these manual focus lenses to be able to determine where your focus actually is. And then you also have the ability to zoom in digitally while using these manual focus lenses. So while you're using the viewfinder, you can actually magnify in and check your focus and make sure it's where it needs to be. This was something we could do with DSLRs, but only when you were in live view. When you're not in live view, you don't have that ability to zoom in with an optical viewfinder, but now we do have that ability because the viewfinder is electronic. We can magnify in on it and check our focus, which is huge. And then lastly, no more need for autofocus fine tune. And this is really another big advantage of mirrorless is you don't have to do any fine tune adjustments for lenses front focusing or back focusing like you would sometimes have to do with DSLRs. They're going to front focus sometimes or back focus sometimes on the focus point and not be exactly where you need it to be. And that's something you have to compensate for. You can correct for that. It's not very enjoyable to do, and it can be costly if you're having somebody else do it. But because of these mirrorless cameras doing all of the focusing directly on the sensor itself, focusing is 100% accurate now. So wherever your focus point is, that's going to be the sharpest point of your image. You're not going to have to worry about it missing slightly in front or slightly behind that focus point. It's always going to be accurate no matter what lens you use, which is going to save you time and save you money overall. So talking about the sensor sizes, because there are mirrorless cameras out there that can give you a point and shoot size camera that can have a micro four thirds size sensor or larger. And really the three main sensor sizes that we're talking about when it comes to mirrorless cameras is micro four thirds, APS-C, and full frame. And there are a couple other ones down here on this chart, which I'll talk about. First off, you have 1/2.5. So 1/2.5, you're typically going to find in point and shoot style cameras, entry level point and shoot cameras. It's a very small sensor. Then you're going to jump up to a 1-inch sensor. 1-inch sensor is going to be in some higher end point and shoot cameras. Going to give you a little bit more resolution. And then you jump up to micro four thirds from both Olympus and Panasonic. Micro four thirds is a great way to save size and weight if you don't want to carry around the big lenses and the big cameras anymore. Micro four thirds is a great way to go ahead and save size and weight. I've been selling more and more micro four thirds size cameras over the past 1.5 to 2 years because people don't want to carry around those big cameras and big lenses anymore, especially a lot of the wildlife photographers who I work with. I've seen them starting to transition over to micro four thirds because of that size and weight savings. Then you jump up to APS-C. Nikon, Canon, Sony, and Fuji all have APS-C sized cameras, so a lot of different options out there. Going to give you a little bit more resolution, a little bit larger file. It's going to give you a slightly larger camera as well because of that, and slightly larger lenses because of that as well, but still relatively compact. Then you jump up to full frame for both Nikon, Canon, Sony, and Panasonic. All of them have full frame mirrorless cameras out there on the market. I'm sure many of you are probably shooting with a full frame camera. So there's a lot of options for full frame mirrorless out there as well. I will say the one thing with full frame cameras is while the body may be physically smaller than your DSLR full frame camera, the lenses tend to still be relatively large because they have to be large enough to allow enough light to cover that sensor. So comparable lenses that are full frame in mirrorless versus DSLR are traditionally going to be around the same size and weight. There are some exceptions, but if you're really looking to save a ton of size and weight, I highly recommend checking out micro four thirds or even APS-C. That's going to be a good way to save you some size and save you a little bit of weight. And then lastly, pictured on here is medium format, which there are 2 medium format mirrorless systems out there from Fuji and Hasselblad. So if you're somebody looking for the most resolution possible, the largest sensor size, there are some medium format mirrorless cameras out there on the market as well. Going on to the viewfinder, because I think the viewfinder is probably one of the most important things in these mirrorless cameras. I think it's the biggest advantage across the board that you get. It's so different than an optical viewfinder in so many good ways. And the first way is more available shooting information that you have to work with. So I have two examples here, an electronic viewfinder on the left and an optical viewfinder on the right. And the first thing you'll probably notice is one, that you actually see a photo in this one, but two is you have a lot more settings along the left side, along the right side, along the top that you don't have with the optical viewfinder on the right. And that's because, again, you don't have any electronics going on inside this optical viewfinder to actually have anything there. But now we can actually overlay some of these settings. You can make these adjustments on the fly while you're shooting. You don't have to worry about going through the menu system to try to make those changes or make those adjustments or find where that setting is. First of all, you can have it all there in your viewfinder. And if you don't want to have it, you can turn it off as well. You can cycle through different display modes. So it's going to show you different things. But the ability that you actually have to see it is really nice and definitely a big advantage. Because it's electronic now, we have the ability to overlay different things like a live histogram, so we can make sure we're not clipping on our highlights or clipping on our shadows. We can overlay a digital level, so we can make sure our horizon is straight. Something that I use a lot when doing landscape photography is that digital level. If I'm hand holding, making sure my horizon straight is key. And then the biggest one, really, in my opinion, is seeing exposure and depth of field in real time. So what you see with these electronic viewfinders is what you're going to get as a final image. You're going to see the exposure, you're going to see the white balance, you're going to see your depth of field. You're going to get a real preview of what it's going to look like before you even take the photograph, which is huge. And also a major time saver. You don't have to worry about taking an image, reviewing it in the playback menu, saying, oh no, it's overexposed or underexposed, going back, making those adjustments and taking the photo again, and risk missing the shot. You can do those adjustments on the fly. You can see those adjustments happening in real time as you're changing your settings. You can see it getting brighter or darker. You can see your depth of field getting larger or smaller. And it's just not something that you can do with optical viewfinders and never will. So that is a huge advantage. More useful for manual focus, as we just talked about in the previous slide. And you can also shoot video through the viewfinder now. So if you're somebody who does a lot of video, this is a really big advantage. You don't have to only record video now through that rear LCD screen. You can actually record video through the viewfinder, block out any glare or any light, and make sure your exposure is correct, make sure your composition is correct, and hold that camera up to your eye, make it a little bit more stable that way as well. And then lastly, no viewfinder blackout for some of these models. So if you're shooting a burst, you know that every time you take a photograph, that mirror flips up with the DSLR to block any light coming through the viewfinder so it can actually be captured on the sensor. So it's going to black out every time you take a photo and that mirror keeps flipping up and down. But with this electronic viewfinder now and eliminating the shutter, or I should say, excuse me, eliminating the mirror, there's nothing there blocking the light from coming in through that viewfinder. So you can have a continuous view of what you're photographing the entire time, and it's never going to black out. You're not going to lose track of your image or your subject in your frame, I should say. So that's another big advantage that you get with this electronic viewfinder. So talking about in-body stabilization, because I think this is probably the second biggest advantage with mirrorless cameras, and I put this as the second because it's not something that you're going to find in every mirrorless camera out there on the market. It is becoming more common, and you're seeing more cameras actually implement this into it, but it's not something that you're going to find in every camera. In-body stabilization, however, is a huge advantage. It's something that I have in my camera that I definitely use all the time. It's pretty much always on. It does help me out a lot. And what it is actually the sensor itself being stabilized. So no matter which direction you move the camera in, it's on a 5-axis kind of gyroscope in there. And no matter which direction you move the camera in, the sensor is going to compensate for that. So it's actually being compensated for right where the image is being captured. So it's a lot more accurate and it's a lot better stabilization than lens stabilization. So how does that work and what does that mean? So it means you can pretty much stabilize or put any lens on these stabilized cameras and you're going to have a stabilized system now because you can adapt lenses over to a stabilized body. Now it's going to be a stabilized system, which is really great. So if you're using some of those older manual focus lenses, you now have image stabilization, which is not something that you previously had, especially with film cameras that they were designed for. So that's really cool. And you can also use image stabilized lenses in conjunction with image stabilized cameras to improve it that much more, which I'll talk about in a second. But really how this works is image stabilization, or in-body image stabilization, I should say, is classified in numbers of stops. So for this example, we have 4 stops of in-body image stabilization. which means we should be able to make the shutter speed 4 stops longer than the average guideline. And that average guideline is 1 over the focal length of the lens you're using. So say we're using a 50mm lens, the slowest shutter speed you would want to go to with a DSLR is a 50th of a second. Now, that's just a rule of thumb. Some people can go longer, some people have to go shorter, but that's kind of a good rule of thumb to follow and a kind of a good place to put us at for this example. So again, with a non-stabilized camera, a 50th of a second is the slowest you would want to go down to without reducing or without risking any blur or any movement in your image. Now, if we put that same 50mm lens on a camera that has 4 stops of in-body stabilization, it means we can make that shutter speed 4 stops longer, bring it all the way down to a quarter of a second and still getting the same amount of sharpness, the same amount of clarity, no blur, no motion whatsoever in your image, but you're shooting at a quarter of a second now. That is because of that in-body stabilization allowing you to drop the shutter speed so much that you can hand hold it that slow, which is really remarkable. It eliminates the need for a tripod in a lot of cases. And doing night photography, you don't have to worry about boosting up your ISO nearly as high. You can just drop down your shutter speed a little bit and have your ISO at a more reasonable point. And then lastly, there's some cameras out there like the Olympus EM1 Mark III. When you pair it with their 12 to 100mm lens, that will give you up to 7.5 stops of image stabilization. And I'll let Eric talk more about that in his portion of the program. But I've seen images taken at 3 seconds and 4 seconds handheld with that camera and lens that are tack sharp, which is remarkable to me. I can't think of holding anything still for that long, let alone a camera, and creating a sharp image. So that is really awesome that you can do that now. So who are the players? Who's actually making these cameras? Starting off with Nikon and Canon, both of them came into the mirrorless, or I should say full frame mirrorless realm about 2 years ago. Both of them actually just came out with a couple of new cameras over the past few months that have been really popular. The Nikon Z6 Mark II and the Z7 Mark II, and the Canon R5 and the R6. Really awesome cameras if you guys are Nikon or Canon shooters. All of those cameras I would highly recommend for a variety of different reasons. But there are a lot of great options from both Nikon and Canon out there on the market. Sony and Fuji, I'll let John speak a little bit more about Sony in his presentation, but there's a lot of great offerings from Sony. Fuji has their X series, which is all APS-C, more of a retro style design. You have different knobs and buttons that are similar to a film camera, so you can change your shutter speed and you can change your ISO with a dial instead of a wheel or going into the menu system. And then Fuji also has their medium format system as well. And then Panasonic and Olympus, most commonly known for a Micro Four Thirds, but Panasonic does also have some full frame mirrorless cameras as well. I'll let Eric speak more to Olympus when he presents, but there are a lot of great offerings from Olympus as well. And another good way to save a lot of size and weight by switching to something like Micro Four Thirds. So are mirrorless cameras better than a DSLR? A lot of people will ask me that, and I think they're different. They're not always going to be better. With that being said, though, I think there are a lot of features that will benefit you as a photographer that you're not going to get with a DSLR. And I just wanted to run down this pros and cons list here and kind of explain some of those to you. So some of the pros of mirrorless, again, it can be smaller and lighter, save you a little bit of size, save you a little bit of weight. Equal image quality to comparable DSLRs, a huge lens support for legacy lenses. So if you're a Nikon or Canon shooter, being able to adapt those legacy lenses over from their DSLRs, the ability to adapt lenses from other manufacturers, the in-body stabilization, which we just spoke about, the electronic viewfinder and all of the options that it offers, and then also the ability for silent shooting now with an electronic shutter, which I didn't really talk about much at all, but I did want to touch on before we wrap things up, is that now we can shoot completely silently with these mirrorless cameras and have an electronic shutter. Instead of a mechanical shutter opening and closing and making noise, it's going to be completely silent now. So a lot of wildlife photographers like this, a lot of event photographers, wedding photographers, they can get closer to the action without being as loud and causing distraction or drawing attention to themselves and still create images, which is huge. Couple of cons, because there definitely are a few. Smaller native lens systems, and that's mostly when you're talking about Nikon and Canon. They haven't been producing these full frame mirrorless cameras nearly as long as the other mirrorless cameras that are out there on the market from some of the other brands. So they don't have as many native lenses out there. Electronic viewfinder, again, while it is so great, it has so many advantages, it's not always to everyone's liking. It's definitely an adjustment to get used to it, especially if you're used to using an optical viewfinder your entire life. Switching over to something electronic is definitely a little bit of an adjustment and takes some time to get used to. But if you give yourself the chance to work with it, I think you'll really see those advantages are only going to help you out in the long run. Autofocus performance, again, it can vary a little bit from camera to camera, but for the most part, it's gotten a whole lot better, especially in some of the higher end cameras. They have some amazing autofocus capabilities. And then lastly, battery life. Battery life is one thing that is lacking across the board. With these mirrorless cameras and the electronic viewfinder, that viewfinder now is drawing way more power than the optical viewfinder ever did, which is resulting in poorer battery life. And I think the camera manufacturers have done a good job addressing this and making it much better. It still does have some ways to go to beat DSLRs, but overall it has gotten a lot better, but is lacking a little bit across the board. And did want to talk about some different mirrorless accessories. These aren't specific for mirrorless, but things that can make your mirrorless shooting experience a little bit better. L brackets is something that I always use. I bought an L bracket about a year ago, and I have not taken it off my camera since. If you're somebody who uses a tripod, this is a huge advantage to you as long as you have an Arca Swiss compatible head. An L bracket is going to be a huge advantage. It's going to allow you to mount your camera horizontally or vertically and keep the weight centered and not have to worry about dropping your camera off to one side to shoot vertically now. So that's a big advantage. Camera cages, which we have up here on the top right, is going to add some protection, but really what it's going to do is allow you to add on different accessories like microphones, audio recorders, video recorders, external monitors, different accessories that you can add on to the camera. A lot of videographers will use this to add on those accessories and make it a more complete operation. Hand grips, which we have here on the top left, is a nice advantage to somebody who has a larger hand. Because these cameras are smaller, the ergonomics aren't always quite as good as their DSLR counterparts. So getting something like a hand grips can give you a little bit more to grab onto and make it a little bit more of a comfortable shooting experience. Lightweight and compact tripods are becoming more popular. You don't have to carry around those big, bulky Bogan or Manfrotto tripods that weigh a ton that you don't want to use. You can get something a little bit smaller, something a little bit lighter, because it doesn't have to support nearly as much weight. And then lastly, stabilized gimbals for anybody shooting video. And I know a lot of people who use mirrorless also shoot video as well. It's a great platform for recording video. Stabilized gimbals are going to be great for any video that you do, and make sure your footage is as stable and as motionless as possible, and allow you to move around with it and not have any blur or any shake. So there's a lot of different cool accessories out there. Did just want to highlight a few before we got to our last slide here, which is my contact information, which I told you guys I would share for you at the end. If you do have any questions, I will also put my email down in the chat. So if you want to take a photo of the screen or do a screenshot on your computer, go ahead and do that now. My email is there at the top. Please reach out anytime you guys have any questions or you need anything. Our website, huntsphoto.com. We're kind of getting through halfway through December now. We still have some great holiday specials going on. If you want to check those out over on our website, we have our own online education now that we've been doing. We have been doing a ton of online classes. We also do prints as well. So if you're looking to get prints made, you can do that off of our website too, have them shipped directly to you. And then lastly, just our Facebook page. If you guys aren't following us over on Facebook, check in on there. We've been doing some different photo contests, sharing and featuring some of our favorite products of the year with some discounts and some videos and some photos to go along with it. So definitely check out our Facebook page as well. But I'll leave this up here for another second if anybody didn't get a chance to take a photo of it. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and then we can jump into some questions and then keep on moving along. So I'm just going to read down the chat here. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. That's where I'll be pulling from. So will the L series Canon lenses work on Canon mirrorless? Are there any limitations? What functions will I lose? You won't lose any functions. There are no limitations whatsoever. The only limitation you have is just that little adapter, but that doesn't really add too much size or doesn't add too much weight. But they are going to work seamlessly on the new R series cameras without any loss of quality whatsoever. let's see here. Go to one of the adapter manufacturers and they will send you a list of what's available. Yeah, there's a whole list. Two adapter companies that I would recommend would be Photodiox or Metabones has some as well, but there's another one that I'm blanking on. Novaflex, Photodiox or Novaflex would probably be my two recommendations for adapters. Both of them have tons. Photodiox probably has even more than Novaflex. I'd say they're probably the biggest adapter manufacturer. So there's tons of adapters out there. You can go to their websites and see all the different offerings. How durable are mirrorless versus DSLR, considering rough treatment and travel, sports, bad weather? A lot of them are very weather sealed. So weather sealing is very good still on a lot of these cameras. I would say they're still just as rugged for the most part as DSLRs. Sometimes you will get more dust and stuff on the sensor, but a lot of them have done a good job with their automatic sensor cleanings to kind of knock all that dust off there. But that's really the only thing I would maybe worry about is having to clean your sensor more often, depending which camera you go with, because you don't really have any mirror there blocking the dust from kind of it being attracted to that sensor itself when you change lenses. So that would be the only thing that I would personally worry about. Olympus Pro lenses are weatherproof. Yes. Eric said you can talk more about the weather sealing and dust sealing. So yeah, Olympus has some great weather sealing. So does Sony. So let them talk more about that. Any other questions for myself right now? If not, I'm going to pass it on to either Eric or John, whoever would like to go next. And then we can keep on rolling so we don't keep you guys here all night.
I don't remember who went first the last time, so I'll leave that up to John. I don't recall.
All right. I'll go first, I guess.
You
All
got
right.
it, John. Sounds good.
Sure. All right. So my name is I'm John Helgeson. I've been working with Sony for well, basically before we even had an interchangeable lens camera in about 2006. Been working with Hunts Photo since that point, and my role is to work with consumers and photo specialty dealers specifically. What I'm going to do tonight is kind of give you an overview of Sony. Those of you considering moving to mirrorless and all the advantages it brings you, I'll sort of make my pitch as to why you should take a really close look at Sony. So I'm going to start sharing the screen and we'll get started. Whoops. And there we go. If speak up, Noah, or whoever, if you don't see my screen, but
I see it. We're all good.
we should be good. Zoom is pretty stable and easy to use. I've been using different formats over the past many months, and yeah, Zoom is kind of the king. So anyway, so let's get started. My contact information is up here. Also my Instagram handle. There'll be I'll show that again at the end, along with a couple of helpful links, and please always feel free to reach out to me. I'm gratified that as we go through these webinars that, you know, more and more people are getting comfortable about reaching out and asking questions. And, you know, unfortunately, there's not a lot of choice, but you know, we do what we can. So to start out with, sort of the why Sony idea. All our core devices are built in-house. The image sensors, the lenses, and of course, the processors. As a point of interest, the image sensor industry is actually pretty much dominated by Sony. We make more mirrorless imaging sensors than anyone else. And actually, if you're looking at any given camera, there's better than half odds that it was made by Sony, regardless of the brand on the front. And obviously, there's a lot more to cameras than the sensors, and it's more of a there's a lot more to it. But just to give a background about how long Sony has been involved and at what level our technology has brought us. So when we're talking a little more in depth about photography and Sony's approach to it, we like to talk about the 5 fundamentals, and starting with lenses. And you know what they say: you date your cameras, but you marry your lenses. Lenses are extremely important in Sony. We feel we've done an amazing job with our lens production and technology advancements. We innovate to keep up both with the latest in optics and with things like focus speed. Mirrorless cameras are capable of using machine learning or artificial intelligence more than a DSLR. Basically, everything's happening on that sensor. One of the challenges of some manufacturers is to keep up with the speed that a camera can attain focus and transfer that speed and match it with the lens. And Sony excels at this. We don't have lenses that predate the film era. And specifically mirrorless lenses, we've been making for about 10 years. So the methods that we use and the technology to move those focusing lens elements is pretty amazing. And if you're interested, you can see all that kind of stuff on things like Sony's YouTube channel. They're called linear actuators, and it's pretty amazing how they function. So Sony approaches their lenses with 4 lines. We have the Sony, which is sort of the basic line. Then we have 3, so-called high-grade lens lines. G, which is something inherited from Minolta, for any of you former Minolta shooters out there. Zeiss. Zeiss makes their own lenses for Sony. If it's autofocus, it's Sony. They do make manual focus for other brands and for us, but we make within our line, it's kind of referred to as Sony Zeiss. And Sony Zeiss is designed by Sony and Zeiss and quality controlled by Zeiss. So each individual Zeiss lens, before it leaves the factory, has to pass quality control. And then our latest offering is the G Master lenses, and those are the lenses that are quite honestly using the newest technology. Some of that stuff has moved into other of our lenses. These were the first lenses that were using the linear actuators, and the standards for the optics are much greater than anyone before has been able to do. And we kind of refer to those lenses as the lenses for the cameras of tomorrow, specifically referring to our highest resolution sensors that we have. So the next fundamental is image quality, and this really ties a lot into lenses and obviously the sensors. There's a reason that our sensors are being used throughout the industry, and And those advances in the lenses and the sensor technology's ability to achieve dynamic range of 15 stops, and it kind of goes on from there. So the next fundamental is speed. To give you one example, we have a category of camera that uses something called the stacked sensor technology. Basically, memory is on the sensor itself, which speeds up all the processing. And these cameras are capable of recording at 20 frames per second with no blackout, so no black screen between shots, silently, but more importantly, capable of calculating autofocus and exposure 60 times per second, which is an amazing feat and has really revolutionized what cameras are capable of doing. So battery life, which Noah mentioned, in full frame cameras, we've reached the point where we're able to get 710 to 740 shots out of a charge, which is, pretty much equaling what DSLRs have done. Our APS-C line, the smaller censored cameras, do still have some challenges with battery life, simply because the batteries are smaller. The APS-C cameras, and I'll talk about the line briefly by category in a moment, but because a mirrorless camera is always on, the sensor is always on, along with an electronic viewfinder. And believe it or not, that electronic viewfinder uses more power than the LCD. It can be kind of hard to avoid. And as Noah mentioned, when you're using an APS-C camera, if you're doing any kind of long day, you would want to be carrying more than one battery. And then compact and lightweight. As Noah mentioned, once you're using a full frame camera, although the lenses are lighter than their DSLR counterparts, they can still get heavy because they're covering a large sensor. There's really no way around that. And especially if they're a particularly fast lens or lens with a fixed large aperture, the effect on weight can be there. But if you're out in the field, a few ounces can add up quickly and make a difference quickly as you're moving throughout your day. And if you're carrying equipment more than just what's around your neck, the weight will definitely, as I said, add up fairly quickly. So to give you an idea of Sony, how far Sony has achieved in the camera industry, we not only have the #1 selling full frame camera in the world for months and months and months, we also recently achieved exclusivity with the Associated Press. So that should, ease any concerns or questions about capabilities and reliabilities, and to be able to work with AP for still and video cameras is pretty cool. It says a lot about our gear. So now talking about our lineup, we've been producing mirrorless cameras a pretty long time. We've been producing full frame mirrorless cameras quite a bit longer than anybody else out there. We're in the teens as far as the total number of models we've produced, many of them still available, especially full frame. Something like 13 or so total for each category, full frame and APS-C. So starting with the full frame cameras that are on the top of this slide, the Alpha 7 is the all-around camera, sort of the versatile. We're up to the Alpha 7 Mark III. That is the camera I mentioned as being the best seller in the world. If you read up on it on, some unbiased sites, don't just go to Sony's site. You'll read that what was said about this camera was that it kind of hit new heights in terms of capabilities, especially for the price. As I mentioned, we're at the 7 Mark III level at this point. So back when we first introduced full frame, we also introduced the Alpha 7 R. The R is for resolution, and that camera is a favorite of, not surprisingly, people who are looking for high resolution. The other thing that R denotes sort of on the techie or geek level is that the optical low pass filter has been removed, and that filter is on over 90% of cameras to achieve image quality that you need in terms of things like moire. The problem with having a filter on the camera is to achieve the sharpest, and highest resolution. When you remove that, you remove what that filter does, which basically blurs the image at the pixel level. So yeah, that gets kind of complicated, but that's really what that line is all about. And we are at the Alpha 7R Mark IV at this point. And we've reached the resolution of 61 megapixels. The next concept that came out was the Alpha 7S. S is for sensitivity. This is another camera that changed everything, especially in terms of low light shooting and video in particular. We've got an extended ISO up to 409,000. This camera was quickly recognized as being able to shoot in the dark, and it's really quite amazing. And after more than a couple years of waiting, the Alpha 7S Mark III came out this summer or early fall, achieving new standards in the hybrid cameras that can shoot still images and professional level video. And following that, the Alpha 9. The Alpha 9 is our speed camera. So that's the camera that can record at 20 frames per second and calculates focus and exposure 60 times per second. And we have two versions of that, the original and the Mark II. And our latest concept is the Alpha 7C, and our first in that line is a month or so old. This is one of the very smallest interchangeable lens cameras you can buy, and it has a few new features, and it's really designed to be a camera for not just somebody who's really kind of trying to keep the size and weight down and still shoot full frame, but it also has applications for people who want to produce some video, whether it's amateur or whatever level. So then moving on to the APS-C line, which I'm showing at the bottom here, the Alpha 6000 is probably our longest running camera model, besides some, point and shoot cameras we've had for quite a while. This camera has been very successful. Again, it's one of those cameras that has been touted for its price and value. So we still have this camera available, and depending on what promotions are running, let me see, that camera body will start at $400. And this is a camera with a 24 megapixel sensor, an electronic viewfinder, roughly a couple hundred autofocus points on the sensor, and capable of capturing at 11 frames per second. So moving on, the three new cameras that replace some original lineup that came out came along shortly after the 6000. We have the 6100, the 6400, and the 6600. And these cameras are more a matter of feature sets increasing as you move through the model line from 61 to 64 to 66. The 66 gets a tiny bit bigger. It does have the battery from our newer generation full frame cameras, so you're getting extremely long battery life out of that camera. They're all 24 megapixel models, and definitely an option for people want to keep the size and weight down. So I'm only going to talk about a couple of features. The first one is just fun because it's animal eye autofocus. This is another Sony first. And one thing that Sony's known for is listening to and letting the customers guide us as to what they want in their cameras. And animal eye autofocus had been something that people were asking us about for many, many years. And a couple of years ago, we achieved it. And mostly works with dogs and cats and animals that have two front-facing eyes. I've achieved eye autofocus on horses in profile where only one eye was visible, but that's kind of a case of under promise and over deliver. The capabilities will keep improving as they did with human eye autofocus. And on this slide, I'm kind of talking about sort of where our technology sits as you set up your camera. You can set it up for tracking, have your eye autofocus on, and as you either use back button focus or half press the shutter, it's going to automatically find an eye. And unlike the very early iterations of this, the model and the photographer can be moving. And we've progressed in terms of how well it can focus on an eye. The eye can be closed, as you can see here, or mostly closed. It works with glasses. It can handle a model moving very rapidly and stay locked in. And this on some of our cameras will also work for video, which is definitely a Sony thing. Unfortunately, we don't have mask detection yet. So taking pictures of subjects with their that are behaving and wearing their mask, that can challenge. Eye autofocus basically works for the most part with geometry of the eyes, nose, and mouth. And when you cover your nose like you should with your mask, and your mouth, of course, it can get tricked. But in any case, so as you're achieving focus, and it's got the eye, if it loses the eye for whatever reason, like a mask, it will go to face detection. And even if that doesn't work, the next step is, we call it real-time tracking. And on the left side of the screen, you'll see the little symbol, you'll see your indicator with the green box with the two vertical bars. And this is a groundbreaking achievement. And this is using artificial intelligence. And we're actually measuring and looking at more than just distance and size of subject to keep locked on. DP Review has complimented us on the stickiness of this kind of autofocus. So as far as our lenses go, we just recently achieved the number of 59 E-mount lenses. Honestly, the latest one is for pretty much exclusively for video, but it is an E-mount. Our E-mount lenses work on all of our cameras and all of our video cameras with interchangeable lenses. So part of our success has been that an enthusiast or somebody trying to have a side hustle and make some money, or a full-time professional, they can use their lenses on so many different E-mount still cameras and video cameras, it really allows them to progress through the system. We produce lenses that start at about 1.4. We're capable of producing lenses at 1.0 or less. There's third-party makers that make 0.95 aperture lenses for Sony mount. But so far, because of weight and size and price, we've been producing 1.4 and greater. So it's been 10 years since we started with the E-mount, 10-year anniversary, and there is no mirrorless camera maker with this variety. And again, we're talking about the one mount for all, whether you're shooting full frame or APS-C, still or video, professionals, or not. It's one mount for everything. Just a couple of new products. This was a groundbreaking lens, as in the fact that it's 12 to 24 and 2.8 all the way through. There is no lens that competes. This is definitely a Sony only achievement, at least to this point. Most of the 12 to 24s that you'll see out there are f4 or slightly different focal ranges if they are at 2.8. And this is our G Master line. S3, I mentioned as where we stand with our S models, sensitivity. This camera actually has all the newest technology that will start moving through into new cameras, but this is the most technologically advanced camera that we are producing right now. One of the key factors in digital photography, which is also kind of boring, is when you talk about the processor. But the processor is the brain, and it's what makes all the calculations and takes the capture that you've made with your sensor and turns it into an image. And this processor, we're very proud of. It's actually 8 times faster than the previous top of the line processor. So I won't go into any details here. You can reach out to me separately. And then the new concept camera, the Alpha 7C, C is for compact. It's not the replacement for the Alpha 7 III. It's a little different. And again, this is mainly for size and weight. We did add a side mounted LCD for just the second time on a interchangeable lens camera. The picture didn't show it, but the Alpha 7S Mark III also has a side mounted LCD, and this camera has some capabilities that are unique to it and compared to the other full frame cameras, but again, it's really about the size, and I highly recommend going into a dealer near you and get your hands on this camera. So that's it for me. Here is my contact information, along with right there up in big, beautiful Cinnabar font, Alpha Universe, alphauniverse.com. I'm on there every day. It's a very vibrant and dynamic site. And whether you want to see latest gear and pricing, or you want to get some information or just have some fun with different stories, I highly recommend it. And some other things like support I've noted here as well. And again, if you have any questions, I'll take them now, and you can also reach out to me later through my email or through Noah. And thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for John about any Sony cameras, lenses, Sony products whatsoever? Now is the time to ask. He is the expert, and I'm sure he would be happy to answer any of them for you. Well, no questions is sometimes a good thing. Means you covered everything too well.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, John. If anybody has any questions that pop up at the end as well, we can all reconvene at the end too. But Eric, go ahead and take it away.
You got it. All right, let's do this. Let's go to full screen. And let me just go into presentation view. And let's see. Come on, where are you? There we go. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, because I know the last time we did this, no, it didn't advance. So I'm going to advance one screen here and we'll see, did that advance?
It did. Yep. Awesome. We're good.
Awesome. All right. Well, first off, welcome everyone. I will start by saying, Linda, you're in charge of calling 911 if I put anyone to sleep. So, and they fall off their chair. All right. So that's your job. But my name is Eric Sives and I'm the technical sales executive for Olympus. Kind of like John, my job is similar and maybe slightly different. I do have sales responsibility for customers as well as being involved on the technical side of the business, meaning helping train both store associates and consumers through our education programs and things like that. So here's my contact information and a beautiful shot of me and a nice shot of me with some of our product there. Olympus recently celebrated their 100th anniversary, actually back in October of 2019. So it's basically a little over a year ago now that we've celebrated our 100th anniversary. But as far as Olympus is concerned, there's really three main divisions. We're a very big medical and scientific company. And from the consumer side of things, we're, the imaging business, essentially our cameras. But and we believe we're making people's lives healthier, safer, and more fulfilling with our products. So, the healthier and safer is probably the medical and scientific. The more fulfilling has got to be the imaging part of the business. And I always like to show this this picture here because Olympus has been around, like I said, for 100 years, and we've had a lot of firsts in the industry. Including things like the world's first splash-proof camera back in 1986. And since then, we've been, kind of honing in on those technologies and making them better and better. So now we have, cameras or mirrorless cameras with weather sealing. And someone asked earlier about the weather sealing and durability of the cameras. And they really have come such a long way. We have a couple models that are actually IPX1 certified, which essentially means that they went through extensive weather sealing testing, water, and they do withstand, the effects of Mother Nature, so to speak. So yeah, you can really put the cameras through a lot of hard work. And what's nice about it, one of the world's first is the world's first dust reduction system. When you open up a mirrorless camera or take the lens off the front of the camera, you'll actually see the sensor right there in front of your eyes. And the importance of dust reduction becomes very, very evident at that point, because if you take that lens on and off quite a bit, you want to have a system that can remove the dust from the sensor. And ours actually has what's called a supersonic wave filter. And when you turn the camera on, it positively charges the sensor. It actually shakes it 30,000 times a second, and the dust falls off into these little collection wells. It's a proven system for dust, and weather sealing is water, snow, dust, you name it. The cameras and the pro lenses are all essentially, made to withstand Mother Nature's fury. So a couple other things Noah touched on was the Image stabilization. All of our cameras now have 5-axis IS in body, which is phenomenal. And then some of them sync with our lenses, giving you up to 7.5 steps of image stabilization. And I'll show you a couple pictures here in just a second. But as far as the market goes, people ask, well, why does Olympus not have a full frame camera? We believe that there is really two market trends going on. There's the, let's call it micro four thirds and APS-C size cameras, and then there's the full, the full frame market. And where we really decided to kind of hone in on our technologies and develop a product line was around a smaller and more compact system, because that's what our original designer felt was one of the most important things, is that the camera had to be feel good in your hands, be small and lightweight, and always with you in order to get the shot. So we decided to go with micro four thirds. When you combine, and this will kind of be a little repetitive to what John was saying with some of the core attributes, so to speak, of a good system. But here with Olympus, what we believe makes up a great mirrorless camera is the image sensor, high quality optics, fast processing, and of course, really good image stabilization. So this kind of gives you a quick little, maybe humorous type of look, but basically you can see this guy here, he's shooting without a tripod. The schematic down below is showing a system that would be approximately, twice the weight of the Olympus, the same size lens, essentially focal length. And so that's why we went with the micro four thirds. We wanted to be compact and lightweight so you can travel and enjoy photography and not be weighted down by big lenses and what have you. So less stress while you're hiking. Certainly from a travel standpoint, storing your luggage or your camera gear rather in luggage that can go in an overhead is quite nice. You don't have to worry about throwing your expensive camera gear underneath the plane. And again, the picture on the right here is just showing a person shooting handheld. Once again, because the image stabilization is just so phenomenal in our camera system that you don't really need a tripod for most of your shooting. This just talks briefly about the image stabilization when it syncs with our lenses. So as Noah said, 7.5 steps. So, you do the calculations, you pull out a lens, you figure you can normally hold it at 1/50th of a second. And, with 7.5 steps of image stabilization, you can slow that down drastically. So this next shot kind of gives you a kind of an idea of where our designers play. And you can have the greatest sensor in the world, the largest sensor in the world, the most megapixels. But if you don't have good image stabilization and you have a blurry image, well, then you don't have an image. So we believe that that's really kind of one of the biggest fundamentals for us. And this is the image that kind of Noah was talking about a little bit earlier. This is actually a 4-second handheld telephoto shot. It's taken with our Pro camera, our EM1 Mark II, I believe, in a 12-to-100 lens. It's a 4-second exposure of the Sydney Opera House. Probably many of you know what that is, but for those of you that don't, that's the Sydney Opera House. And it's, obviously it's a night shot. So how do you get a handheld night shot at 4-second exposure in telephoto mode? You've got to really have great stabilization. One of the big advantages that, Noah had spoken about with the mirrorless systems is the focusing points. And John also touched on it too, which is the speed and capabilities of the autofocus, because it's on the sensor. Here with our camera, all 121 focus points on the back of our EM1 Mark II and EM1X cameras are all phase and contrast autofocus points, so that they are capable of following moving subjects like birds and things like that. And our latest firmware that came out just recently for the EM1X does have bird detection, where it'll actually focus on a bird's eye. So if you're trying to take a picture of a bird, and you know that obviously the eye is the most important thing to get in focus, as long as that camera is set in bird autofocus, camera will do the work for you. It's just unbelievable how this technology makes photography a lot more enjoyable and easy to get the shot. This just shows you a quick little schematic here of the weather sealing seals on our cameras, as well as the camera and lenses. You can just see how many gaskets are just all over the camera. And this is a really good slide. I believe it was Dave, I don't know if I have the name right, but was asking about the durability. Look underneath the camera, the outer layer, you're gonna see a magnesium body, which you could literally, this mold here, you could literally stand on and you could not crush it. So they're very durable, well built. When people pick up our cameras, they'll say, oh, this feels like a really solid camera, and that's because they are. I like to show this shot. This was taken about a year ago up in Rhode Island at the Beavertail Lighthouse. I show this because I like to show how capable the weather sealing is on our cameras. The three pictures on the left are the images I took. They're of one of our visionaries, Peter Baumgarten. He's from Manitoula Island up in Ontario, and he's out on these rocks in the salt water, and the ocean is spraying up and over him. And I was nervous that I was going to have to do a water rescue and pull him out of the water. His gear would be gone. But you can see his picture on the right, what he was trying to do, which obviously his picture is much more appealing. I'm one of the two guys standing up on the rocks there, but he got a beautiful picture of the lighthouse and the water. So kind of run through the models here. So we have kind of like three series of OMD bodies, which is OM stands for Olympus, M stands for Mayatani. He was one of our original designers, and then D stands for digital. So our EM1 series is really our professional series cameras. They're built for portability and agile shooting, but they're also, built for, 400,000 actuations on the shutter. They're also built to give a kind of more of a pro feel from a button standpoint and a setup of the body itself. Then you have our EM5 series models. They are also weather sealed, but they are much smaller and lighter weight. So if you're looking for a great small travel camera with, let's say, the feature set of our pro cameras and the weather sealing, but not the size, then these are much smaller and certainly are great travel cameras. And then our EM10 series and our, what we'll call our pen series of cameras are, I'll say yet smaller yet, than a little smaller, let's say, than the EM5 series. They are not weather sealed, but of course they're also meant for both price point, convenience, and for someone looking to step up and get into this system without spending a lot of money. So they're all great models. They all offer 5-axis image stabilization. It's just once you get to the 5 series and the 1 series, you have the weather sealing. And I always like to show these, just a couple of our waterproof cameras that are point and shoots. But the TG6 is a f2 lens, so it's got a really nice, bright, fast lens, and it also shoots RAW. So, if you're looking for a pocket point and shoot camera that'll give you the ability to shoot RAW, this is a great way to go. And if this is the camera that you take to the beach and you don't worry about dropping it in the beach, waterproof, drop proof, freeze proof, it's also crush proof. So kind of like John touched on in his presentation, Olympus kind of designed the Micro Four Thirds system, from the ground up. from day one. And we introduced our first camera in 2008, so it's been about 12 years now. So all of our lenses are fully digital specific. You know, they're meant to be mounted on our camera. The design of them, let me get my cursor to work here, excuse me, is just phenomenal. You know, the optics in these lenses are just absolutely amazing. The fact that they can make a zoom lens that is you know, seriously waterproof. I mean, literally, you can't take it underwater with you. But I mean, I've been out in the pouring rain, and they just withstand all the elements, and they withstand the dust and everything. And this kind of shows you once again, kind of the gasketing on our Pro Series lenses. But one of the other things too is the fact that they're high quality lenses. We've been 100 years ago, and the R&D and all the technology that we've put into designing optics has just progressed over the years into our camera line. So you can see the high quality optic lenses here that we put in our lenses, and it's just absolutely amazing technology. So kind of back to the why Micro Four Thirds for Olympus too. And part of the reason why they chose that format as well was to come up with a lens design that is telecentric, meaning that the light will hit the lens at a perfect 90-degree angle from center to edge. So when you're taking a picture and you've got, you know, something off to the edge of the frame, we want that to be sharp and clear. We want it to be you know, in focus. We want it to have, you know, the proper color and lighting and all that. And our lenses, as you can see from the top schematic here, shows how they shine the light in at a perfect 90-degree angle. And what's important to that is that the pixel wells, you know, have to have the light collect into them. And if they go in and at an angle, you're not, you know, collecting as much light information. So the telecentric design really does come into play. And we have all zero coating on our lenses, which is just a term used for Zuiko extra low reflection. Basically, and bottom line is it reduces flare and glare and ghosting on your images. So a couple lenses to show you. I wanted to show you this new lens, which will start shipping in January. It is a 150-400 with a 1.25 teleconverter. Now, when you look at Olympus lenses and you're trying to compare the focal distance to a 35 millimeter, you'll have to double the focal size because our imager is half the size of a full frame imager. So a 150-400 lens is effectively a 300 to 800 millimeter with a built-in 1.25 teleconverter. This makes this lens a 1,000 millimeter capability. If you put our 2x teleconverter on the back of the lens, you can actually go out to 2,000 millimeter with this lens. So it is a serious birding lens or a nature lens. I need to progress. Let's see. So this is just a shot here taken with the EM1 Mark II. And our 300 millimeter f4 with the 1.4 teleconverter. Going to go through just a couple quick technology slides and then I am done. So I wanted to talk, basically begins taking pictures when the shutter is halfway pressed. So it's kind of like when you're, you know, holding your finger on the shutter halfway down to get lock focus. What Pro Capture does is it starts taking pictures at that point and it puts them into a buffer, and it's basically taking them at up to 60 frames a second, basically, but you can adjust the frame rate on that. And what's kind of cool about it is it's meant to be a feature for, I will call it bird photography more than anything, but here's an instance where they're showing a lizard, you know, shooting his tongue out and catching this grasshopper. And for those of you that are trying to capture a split second in nature, sometimes you miss it. If you just put the camera in a high burst rate, then you've got, hundreds, if not thousands of pictures on your memory card. What's nice about Pro Capture is that it doesn't record the image until you fully press the shutter down. What that allows you to do is to capture that shot, plus up to 35 images, either before or after the shot was taken. So what's nice about that is you don't miss the opportunity to catch the right shot. Talking about some of the customized, customized settings for autofocus. What's nice about some of our Olympus cameras, it'll actually allow you to create your own groups of autofocus points. You can go from one small single standard size, group of 5, group of 9. Again, you can use the whole back of the imager if you're trying to capture something up in the sky, or you can use a much smaller autofocus point. So their mirrorless cameras are very customizable in that respect. There's something called focus bracketing and focus stacking, which is pretty neat. Focus stacking is actually an in-camera setting, which will stack 3 to 15 images in camera and composite them together to give you beautiful front to back focus. And then bracketing will actually allow you to take up to 999 images and actually in computer software stack those together. So you can do shots like this and stack up to 15 images together, or in this case where you have focus bracketing and you can see the crayons in focus from all the way from front to back. So 2 more features to talk about. One is called live composite, and it's a pretty cool feature. Here you can see you've got kind of like this long exposure with the Earth's rotation and the stars. Live composite actually is unique to Olympus. It allows you to actually take 2 exposures in one. It's essentially I will call it a bulb mode, but it's a bulb mode on steroids, because what it does is it actually allows you to lock in the initial exposure of the image and then hit the shutter a second time, and the camera will only record new light. So in the case of this silo here, this I think was the Peter Bumgarten just used a flashlight to kind of light paint with while the shutter was open, and then he was able to capture the rotation of the Earth and the stars, and you can see that the light areas are not blown out on the image. This is maybe a little even better example. I mean, this marquee sign normally would be totally blown out if you put it in the bulb mode and did a long exposure. In this case, the camera locked that exposure in of the city scene, and then on the second press of the shutter, it only recorded the light from the automobiles and what have you driving by. So, and you can actually use it in portrait photography. One of our photographers, visionaries, is Joe Edelman. He's very popular on YouTube, so check him out if you're into portrait photography. He's got some really great instructional stuff, but what he does is he actually uses live composite in his studio to actually light paint behind his models and does some real crazy stuff with lighting. So you can get very creative and have a lot of fun, certainly with the cameras. And this is the last slide here. So finally, there's a new feature called live neutral density in a couple of our cameras. And what this allows you to do is actually apply 5 steps of neutral density to any of your images. And you can see it live time, which is really cool. So like Noah was mentioning earlier with the, now I'm going to draw a blank here with the focus peaking settings on your camera. You can actually see the peaking and the color on the image, and this is the same thing with live neutral density. You can actually see the effect either through the viewfinder or on the back of your LCD before you even take the shot. So and apply up to 5 different steps of neutral density. And what's kind of cool about that is we have a lens which is a 7-14, and it's a f2.8, so that's a 14 to 28 millimeter equivalent. And that lens and our 8mm f1.8 fisheye lens both have built-in hoods on the front. And it doesn't allow you, unless you buy one of the aftermarket manufacturer's brackets, to be able to put a neutral density filter on. It's not you don't have a screw type of mount on the front of those lenses. So what's kind of cool is you can put those two lenses on these cameras and actually apply the neutral density to those images. So, and with that, I want to say thank you very much. Again, my name is Eric Sibes. If you're looking for, additional technical information, you can certainly go to getolympus.com. There's a whole education site in there, as well as tutorials on our products. But I want to once again thank the Camera Club, and I want to thank Hunts Photo for inviting us to be on. And I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll see if we have any questions from anyone.
Awesome. We did have one question come in. Are there any disadvantages to using Panasonic lenses on Olympus or Olympus lenses on Panasonic that you know of?
Yeah, the disadvantages are very minimal, to be honest. I mean, so the Panasonic lenses are fully interchangeable with our system. The one disadvantage, let's say, of putting a Panasonic lens on an Olympus is you may not have the image stabilization syncing technology, communication between the camera and the lens in that respect. But again, our cameras are all 5-axis image stabilized in body. So if you do use a Panasonic lens on the camera, it's going to focus fast. It's going to do everything it's supposed to. And the image stabilization will be up to 5-axis. It's just amazing. So
awesome. This is one that I think we got to reprogram is what is the future of Olympus after having sold the camera division?
Yeah, great question. And, Noah, you know as well as I do, we're moving forward.
Yep.
The new company is called OM Digital Solutions. It's quite a mouthful. It doesn't kind of roll off the tongue as easy as Olympus. But OM Digital Solutions is the new company name. And they purchased all of our patents. They purchased the product roadmap. The Olympus name will be used probably for at least another 3 years from what I hear. And all US warranties, everything, it's all going to be pretty much the same as what it was. Even our repair center is, our service center for our cameras is the same service center that we currently have today. So starting January 1st, which is just a few weeks away, the new company is going to be called OM Digital Solutions, but you'll still see all the products out there with the Olympus name on it.
Awesome. Anybody else have any other questions for myself, for Eric, for John? Now is the time to ask.
Nope, I guess not.
And Linda didn't have to call 911. That was good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Linda.